So in 11-1, what we're doing today is putting things into standard form. All right, there's a couple different kinds of problems that we're going to have. One of the things is remembering how to do the distributive property. With the distributive property, you take the number outside, the parentheses and multiply by the numbers inside the parentheses. So take the number outside the parentheses and multiply by the numbers inside the parentheses. When you go and do that, you have to do number times number, and then you are adding your exponents. Number times number, add your exponents. That's very, very important as we move along in the chapter. So if you take a look at number 1, all we have to do, and you've done tons of these before, -6 times a and -6 times 8. -6 times a is -6a. -6 times 8. Please, if you are somebody who normally writes plus -48, please stop doing that altogether. Don't ever, ever, ever do that, please. All right. All that we want to write there is -48. Don't ever write plus negative. As we move along in this chapter, and especially when we get to next chapter, that will just screw you up big time if you start writing stuff like that. Again, take the number outside the parentheses, multiply by both of the things inside the parentheses. 4 times 1 is 4. 4 times 9x is 36x. Sometimes they have the letter first inside the parentheses, like in number 1. Sometimes they have the letter second, like in number 2. We're not going to do all these. Sometimes they will try and mess with you a little bit by putting the times after the set of parentheses. You still have to take the number outside and multiply by both of the things inside. 2 times 9m is 18m. 2 times 10 is 20. Moving on to a question like number 6. Again, please remember that a negative times a negative is a positive. So -8 times 80, or -8 times 10b is -80b. But -8 times -4. -8 times -4 is positive 32. So we write plus 32. In these next couple problems, you're going to have exponents. Remember that when you multiply letters together, you have to add the exponents. When a letter is all by itself, like this x is, remember that that's really x to the first power and x to the first power when a letter is all by itself. So when we have x times x, x times x, number times number, add your exponents, that's really x squared. X times 7 is 7x. Don't put to the first power. All right, don't put to the first power. Take the number outside the parentheses, multiply by everything inside the parentheses. So in this next one, 2 times x squared is 2x squared. 2 times -3x is -6x. 2 times 5 is 10. We didn't have to add any exponents because we weren't multiplying by an x. We were just multiplying by a 2. If you ever have a negative sign outside of the parentheses, there's really a 1 in front of it. So then we would have to multiply by -1. So -1 times 2x squared is -2x squared. -1 times x is -1x. -1 times -3 is +3. Again, we're not going to do all these. That's just a little recap. You should already know how to do that. You are, in the next 2 chapters, you're going to be factoring a lot of things, all right? You're going to be factoring a lot of things. That's sort of the opposite of the distributive property. You're sort of undoing the distributive property, where in the previous questions, you ended up with things like -6a minus 48. When you go to factor things, we're going to get what was originally written there in the purple, the original question. So you're going to have a number outside parentheses and a number inside the parentheses. We want to take the biggest number out of each term. We want to take what they have in common out of each term and put it outside the parentheses. So if you take a look at a question like number 11, where we have 5n plus 35, what's the biggest number that goes into 5 and 35? 5, right? They have a 5 in common. So we can factor out the 5. That goes outside the parentheses. And now all the leftovers go inside. So 5 times what equals 5n? It would just be an n there. If I divide 35 by 5, because I'm factoring out a 5, what do I have to multiply 5 by to get 35? 7. So this is going to be a plus 7. What's the biggest number that goes into 9 and 12? Well, it would be a 3. So the 3 goes outside the parentheses. And now everything that's left goes inside. I would have a 3x. And 12 divided by 3 is 4. So I'd have a minus 4. You could always go through, when you factor things, you could always go through and double check them by doing the distributive property. 5 times n is 5n. 5 times 7 is 35. 3 times 3x is 9x. 3 times -4 is -12. Sometimes when you have a negative letter, all right, we would want to factor out, in this one, we'd want to factor out a -2. So then we would be left over with a b. Now here's where you need to be careful. -2 times what gives you 6? Well, that would be a -3, because a negative times a negative is a positive. So you just need to be careful. In a question like number 17, where we have an x in both terms, or number 18, where we have an x in both terms, we would want to factor out the x because they have an x in common. What we would be left over with here would be an x plus 8. Sometimes you might have, like in a question like 19, you might have 3 numbers. The number that you factor out has to be in common with all 3 of them. Well, if I have a negative letter there, which I do, -3x squared, I would personally factor out a -3 from here. I can't do a -3x because the 15 does not have an x. So I'd be left over with x squared. If I divide by -3 there, that would be a -4x. 15 divided by -3 is a positive 5. And we're going to do more of that as the chapters go along. So the only thing that we need today in this slide are standard form. All right, that's what we're going to be dealing with today. These are all things that we're going to be using throughout the course of the chapter. There are different forms to put your answers in. All right, there's standard form, there's factored form, there's vertex form. You'll learn all about that. The A, B, and C in these little forms, they stand for specific things that we'll be talking more and more about. The parent function, The parent function is just the original function. But for right now, for today, we have to know what standard form is. In standard form, first of all, it's always equal to either 0 or f of x equals, all right? It has to be equal to one of those. And notice the order that things go in. Ax squared plus bx plus c. That is the specific order that things need to go in. You need your biggest exponent first. So like if we had a 3, that 3 would go even before the 2. If it was to the third power, that one would go first, then the second power. This is really to the first power, and then this one doesn't have an x. So you have to put your exponents in order from left to right. All right, that's in standard form. So when we have if we did like a quick example of this, it might say like 2x squared minus 4x plus 5 equals 0. All right, you might have something that looks like that. That's an answer that's in standard form. Your biggest exponent has to go first. So these are graphs that we're going to be dealing with. All right, we will deal with maximum and minimum. All right, your maximum is your highest value. This point right here, and for those of you in class, please label this. This is your maximum. Your maximum is your highest point in your graph. So when we have a parabola like this, a parabola is a U-shaped graph, your maximum is your highest point of the graph. Your minimum is your lowest point of the graph. So the maximum is your highest, your minimum is your lowest. Your maximum and minimum are also called vertexes. It's the point where the parabola, the U-shaped graph, turns. All right, so it's that turning point on your graph. The x-intercept. The x-intercept is where the graph crosses the x-axis. So this would be an x-intercept, and this becomes very, very important. I think it's tomorrow's lesson. This would also be an x-intercept. It's wherever the graph crosses the x-axis. This would be an x-intercept. It's where the graph crosses the x-axis, and so would this. The axis of symmetry. An axis of symmetry is just like a line of symmetry. It's the line that goes right through the middle of the graph, splitting it into two equal, identical parts. So if we take a look at our pink graph here, this green line goes right down the middle of it. If we were to draw that over here, we'd be drawing it looking like this. This would be our axis of symmetry going right through the middle of the graph. These x-intercepts are also called roots that we'll deal with later on in the chapter. So here's the first type of question that you're going to have today. You are going to have to rearrange the equations to get them into standard form. Every single question has two completely different answers to it, depending on how you do it. What you need to get is you need to get all of the terms all onto one side so that you're left with an equals 0 on one side. Sometimes they have it set equal to 0. Sometimes they have it set equal to f of x. But we want all of the terms onto one side. Now, the easiest way to do this first one, notice that we have 3 terms on this left-hand side, but only 1 on the right-hand side. So it would be easiest in this one to just go plus 5 plus 5. Therefore, these would cancel out. We didn't do anything to the negative 2x squared. We didn't do anything to the plus 10x. Negative 9 plus 5 is -4 equals, what do I have left on that right-hand side of the equal sign? Nothing, because everything canceled out, so it equals 0. This would be a perfectly good answer for this one. And yes, it could be as easily done as that. However, if you wanted to make your life more complicated, sometimes people do, there is a completely different way to do this same exact question. Instead of getting everything over to the left-hand side of the equal sign, I could get everything over to the right-hand side of the equal sign if I really wanted to. I don't, but here we go. We could do plus 2x squared and plus 2x squared. Now, notice that I did not write the plus 2x squared underneath the -5. You want to line up your similar exponents, all right? Notice that I put, when I did the first one, I put the plain number under the plain number. Notice that I didn't put the +5 under the 10x. I didn't put the +5 under the x squareds. You want to line up x squareds with x squareds, x's with x's, plain numbers with plain numbers. So those are gone now. To get rid of that plus 10x, I'd have to do minus 10x and minus 10x. These are gone now. And then to get rid of this minus 9, I'd have to do plus 9 and plus 9. Notice where I put the plus 9. I lined up my plain number and my plain number. So in this one, I got rid of everything from the left-hand side of the equal sign. These canceled out, these canceled out, these canceled out. I have nothing left on that side. On the other side of the equal sign, I have 4 plus 2x squared minus 10x. That's not a right answer though, because it is not in standard form. Standard form says that we have to put the highest exponent first. So I need to switch around my order. I would need to switch around my order. That 2x squared has to go first, minus 10x plus 4. This would be a perfectly acceptable answer as well. Now, if you look at it compared to this one, it's the exact opposite signs. Negative 2x squared, positive 2x squared. Positive 10, negative 10. Minus 4, plus 4. Notice that it's the exact opposite. If you were actually to take your calculator right now and graph these two equations, you would see that they actually graph being identical. Right? So they would have the same roots. They'd have the same x-intercepts. Anyway, every question has two different ways. Every question has two different answers that are both correct. Take a look at this one. You have two things on one side, you have two things on the other. So unlike the previous example that had 3 things on one and 1 thing on the other, this one had an easier way to do it. This one, it doesn't really matter which way you do it. All right, let's get rid of everything from the right-hand side. So plus 6x squared plus 6x squared. Notice where I put the 6x squared. I'm trying to think ahead, putting it in standard form. So I'm going to put it all the way over here, not after the 3. Minus 1, minus 1. Those cancel out, those cancel out. All that you have on that right-hand side is an equals 0. Nothing plus 6x squared is 6x squared. Negative 8x, we don't have anything that goes with that, so that's just minus 8x. Negative 3 minus 1 is negative 4. And this would be your answer. If you did it the opposite way, you'd get the same exact thing, just all different signs, which is an acceptable answer. Take a look at the next one. I have 2 things over here. I have 3 things over here. The easiest way to do this is to take these 2 and move it over to here. It's one less step, rather than trying to take these and move it over to here. So what I would do here, remember that there's really a 1 in front of that x squared. I'm going to do minus 1x squared and minus 1x squared. Again, line them up right away. It makes life easier. I'm going to do plus 4x and plus 4x. Again, there's a 1 in front of that x. So everything canceled out from the left-hand side. I have negative 5x squared minus 1x squared, which is negative 6x squared. I have 1x plus 4x, which is 5x. Nothing goes along with that minus 4, so it just stays minus 4. Take a look at the next one. The next one requires a little bit of distributive property first. We always want to get rid of the parentheses first. X times x gives you x squared. X times negative 4x, or sorry, x times negative 4 is negative 4x. Plus 6 equals 1. I have 3 things on one side. I only have 1 thing on the other side. I would like to make my life easy and just do minus 1 and minus 1. Therefore, I can get my equals 0 on the right-hand side. Then we have x squared minus 4x plus 5. Go ahead and try this next one on your own, please. Go ahead and try the next one on your own, please. Three things on one side, 2 things on the other side. I would do this one by doing minus 8x squared and minus 8x squared, and minus 6 and minus 6. That way, on this right-hand side of the equal sign, I have an equals 0. Negative 1x squared minus 8x squared is negative 9x squared. Nothing goes along with that minus 4x, so that just stays the same. 3 minus 6 is negative 3. So that would be your answer there. If you did it the opposite way, and did the 3 things going over to the right, you would have ended up with 0 equals 9x squared plus 4x plus 3, which is a perfectly acceptable answer. In the next one, they try and trick you. Distribute going backwards. So just be aware of that. So I have 10x plus 2x squared plus 4 equals the f of x. Notice this time they didn't put equals 0, they put equals f of x. Is that in the correct form? No, it's not. The biggest exponent has to go first. So 2x squared plus 10x plus 4. That's what you would need. So be very careful on that. Go ahead and try this next one, please. It doesn't matter which way you go with it. I'm going to get everything over to the right or to the left-hand side from the right-hand side. So I'm going to be doing plus 9x squared minus 8x and minus 7. If you did it the opposite way and did minus 7x squared minus 8x and plus 5, that's fine. We get 16x squared. Those just totally cancel out. You don't need to put plus 0x. All right, don't put that. All right, if this was a multiple choice question on the Regents exam, they would never put plus 0x there. And then minus 12 equals 0. If you did it the opposite way, you would have had negative 16x squared plus 12 instead. Take a look at the next one. The next one tries to trick you a little bit. You have parentheses. Always do the parentheses first. So we want to distribute and distribute to be 6n squared plus 2n all over 3. Now, we can't leave that divided by 3. Since we're dividing by 3, we need to do this divided by 3, and we need to do this divided by 3. We need to do each individual term divided by 3. So 6n squared divided by 3 would be 2n squared. 2 divided by 3, the nice thing is we could just leave it as a fraction. We could leave this as 2/3 n. Or 2n over 3, same thing. The last thing that I need to show you, I need to show you how to find the maximum value on the parabola. Now, your maximum value on your graph of your parabola, all right, here's our axes. Here's our graph of our parabola. The maximum value is that highest point on the parabola. All right, the maximum value is the highest point on the parabola. For those of you in class, and if you have your calculator at home, go ahead and type in that equation into y equals. Go ahead and type that equation into your y equals. So I'm going to type in negative x squared plus 2x plus 8. When you go to graph, because you will have to do this on the quiz this week, all right? When you go to graph, all right, you're going to see this picture. You see the picture of the parabola. You want to then, sometimes the parabola is going to be too big to fit on the screen, so you can play with the zoom a little bit. You can hit zoom and then 0 for zoom fit, or zoom and then 3 for zoom out. Sometimes you might need to zoom out, sometimes you might need to zoom in. It all depends on what you want to do. But to find the maximum, all right, to find the maximum, see where it says calc right above the trace button? Right above the trace button in that upper right-hand corner, it says calc. We want to do second and calc. When you do second and calc, it's going to ask you, do you want to find the value 0, min, max? We are going to be doing zeros later on in the chapter. You will do minimums. Right now we're doing the maximum. So we want to go down to number 4 and hit enter. Now, it comes up with this little blinky thing, all right, this little blinky thing. If you move that little blinky thing, you can move it with the left and right arrows on the arrow pad, all right? You move it with the left and right arrows. Notice at the bottom of the calculator screen, notice that it says left bound. What that's asking you to do, because you're going to have to pick 2 points. You're going to have to pick one point that's on the left-hand side of the max or the min, and then you're going to have to pick one on the right-hand side of it. So right now where my little blinky thing is, our maximum is right there. This is on the left-hand side, so I can hit enter. Now it says right bound, question mark. I need to move my little blinky thing over to the right-hand side of the maximum. All right, it doesn't matter how far past it, all right, but you need one on the left-hand side and one on the right-hand side. Now, notice that I put this little line. There's also a little line there. It just happened to be right on the axis, so you can't see it. But notice how these two little arrows, they're saying it's in between there somewhere, all right? So now it says guess. All you have to do is hit enter a third time. Notice that it gives you the maximum. So our maximum point, the highest point on this parabola, that's really 1, 0.99999. That's really 1. So over to 1, up to 9 is our maximum. Why does it give you an X and a Y point? Because that's really a coordinate. All right, this is really the point. This is really the point 1, 9. It's really the point 1, 9 like that. So again, all you have to do is type in the equation, hit graph, go to second and calc. It's going to go down, you go down to number 4, which is the maximum. You need to click once on the left-hand side, once on the right-hand side, and then hit equals or enter again for your guess. All right. So your class kick today, all right, you have to just do some distributing first, put it in standard form. Don't type any spaces in between the plus or minus signs or anything like that. You have a couple like that as well. You have some where you have to get it all onto one side or onto the other. I put both of the possible answers in there. So whatever you do will be correct, whichever way that you choose to go. And then you have 4 questions where you have to type it in to the calculator. These are the equations that you need to type into the calculator and find the maximum. Notice that I wrote in here to round to the nearest 100th. All right, round to the nearest 100th for the maximums. Questions on any of those? All right, I know that's a long lesson. Can't help it. Those of you on Zoom are free to go.